Folks, Houston Congressman Al Green has always stood up for African Americans and black banks. Well, during a congressional hearing, he advocated on behalf of those banks, saying they should be getting Tier 1 funding. Here's what he had to say.
Let me now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank the ranking member for her comments and would associate myself with the comments of the ranking member. I would call to our attention the intelligence that has been provided to me indicating that there are 4,487 FDIC insured institutions. And it is my belief that less than 50 are black owned. In fact, less than 40 are black owned. To be more accurate, less than 30 are black owned. To be even more accurate, less than 1% are black owned. I'm interested in knowing how we can use this topic of funding access to acquire more black banks. I've been with friends who've started banks. It is not easy to acquire Tier 1 capital. Tier 1 capital. There's not a black bank in the country with $10 billion in Tier 1 capital. Probably 2 exceed 1 billion. Probably 2. Now, Mr. James, you're much more educated on these things than I, so correct me. Do we have more than 2 black banks with Tier 1 capital exceeding $1 billion?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Green. Actually, there are 25 black-owned institutions in the United States, and there are 2 that exceed $1 billion in total assets. Technically, no, there are no institutions that are black-owned that have more than $1 billion in Tier 1 capital. These are institutions that are just over $1 billion in total assets.
And the truth is this: we didn't get here because black people are not intelligent, because they can't count, because they can't be educated. It's racism. So the question becomes, how do we overcome this racism so that black people can own banks and acquire capital? I don't have the answer, but I know what has created the problem. And until we confront this, I'm not sure that we'll be able to resolve the issues associated with starting and maintaining black banks. Mr. James, do you have any answer for me to help me understand how we can acquire more black banks and deal with the racism that still exists?
Thanks again. I do want to acknowledge that in the last 5 years, for the first time in American history, we have seen a convulsion in the United States economy, such as what happened during the pandemic, and actually not seen a decline in African American owned institutions. Typically, when you had the Great Depression or the Great Recession, you would lose typically around half of the black owned institutions would fail because they were undercapitalized. In the last 5 or 6 years, there's been more capital available, and so we've actually seen a slight uptick. So at the beginning of the pandemic, there were only 19 black-owned banks, and now there's 25. And so that's good news. I think it would be very helpful to, again, reduce that community bank leverage ratio to a smaller number, to increase the access for reciprocal deposits and other forms of liquidity, so that you could have smaller institutions of all types, whether they serve urban and rural communities, whether they be black-owned or owned by anyone else, where you could encourage more competition and more different types of institutions. Regulatory reform is also important, because if we can evolve regulatory regulation,
I'm going to have to
we can have more institutions.
I have to intercede because I have to close with this. 2 things. The first is I think that we can do things to help all banks. But at some point, we will have to do something to help black people. We really will. We didn't get here because we were unable to help ourselves. It was because others wouldn't allow us to help ourselves. And the final thing is, are there no women who can do what you men do? I always pay attention to who's on these panels. All male panel. But for this African American, I assume you're African American, you look like one to me, I don't know. But but for the Democrats, we wouldn't have an African American on the panel.
Gentleman's time is
The
expired.
gentleman's time has always expired. I yield back.
Again, perfect example of what happens when you have black representation in Congress. One of the issues that we have been talking about, the more than 300,000 black women who've lost their jobs since Donald Trump went back into the Oval Office. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is demanding answers from Fed Chair Jerome Powell. She joins us right now. Congresswoman, glad to have you back on the show. So what demand are you making of the Fed Chair?
Roland, always good to be with you. The demand that I'm making of the chair is that the Fed do its job. It has a dual mandate, but for now, I'll just speak to one part of that mandate. It's a statutory mandate, and that is to maximum full employment. And, given the alarming rates and spike in unemployment across the board, but for black women in particular, who have always been the canaries in the coal mine when it comes to our economy. The black women represent 12% of the federal workforce. That workforce, had a hammer taken to it. And so when you consider a reduction in force, mass firings, and with a focus on those agencies that black women dominate, housing and urban development, health and human services, USAID, Department of Education. And then you layer that with the defunding and the dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the private sector, and that chilling effect and that rollback. Not only do you see a lack of representation and black women being forced out of the private sector, but black women also dominate diversity, equity, and inclusion jobs. So this is devastating. 51% of black women are the primary breadwinners in their family, the primary caregivers. So this is will be devastating, huge implications for black women, for the black family, and for black communities. And so you're talking about 300,000 black women whose livelihoods and lives have been disrupted. And if any other group were experiencing something as extreme as that, they would already be studying it. What I'm demanding of the chair in their statutory mandate for maximum employment, and given the 6.7 rate of unemployment for black women, is for them to analyze the data, to study it, to come up with a plan of action. And then the second part of it is the other part of their mandate is their independence. And I'm calling on Chairman Powell to be 10 toes down and full-throated in his defense and support of Governor Lisa Cook, the first black woman to be in this role, because in doing that, you affirm the independence of the Fed because her firing is unlawful.
So when did you send that to him, and did you give him a time frame to respond?
Yes, and we'll be following up to see what happens with that. I mean, listen, Roland, we're not just sitting around and waiting for answers. We're going to keep applying the pressure here because this is of deep consequence to black women, to black families, and black America. But again, to the economy writ large, because black women have always been the canaries in the coal mine. So this is a devastating metric of what is to come. And again, when you're talking about 300,000 families who've had their livelihoods and lives disrupted, I think for any other group, this would be a 5-alarm fire. And so we're going to keep the pressure on Chairman Powell and the Fed to honor that statutory dual mandate of maximum employment while also affirming their independence and being full-throated in their defense of Governor Lisa Cook, who is the most recent black leader and black woman in the long line of baseless attacks against black leadership in this administration. This hostile administration is giving obsessed. It is just anti-Blackness on steroids everywhere we go. They are looking to decimate black wealth, to roll back black gains, to dilute the black voice, to disenfranchise our political power at every turn. You know, I was meeting with some allies recently, and I said, you know, we named the attacks on the immigrant community. We named the attacks on the LGBTQ community. We named the attacks on women. I'm going to need you all to name the anti-Black racism that is rampant in this administration and pull up in a meaningful way to confront it. Yes, you know, we are experiencing the harm disparately, and it is not indiscriminate. It is very precise. It is very targeted. So any person of conscience should be linking arms with us and applying pressure in all the ways that we are currently.
Questions from my panel. I'll start first with you, Mustafa.
Congresswoman, it's good to see you. We know historically there are a number of actions that have been put in place all the way back to the Black Codes and Jim Crow and the Freedmen's Bank collapse. How do we make sure that the investments that we need are actually there, but also the regulations to make sure that there's real enforcement in that space?
Well, you know, if you mean specifically to this, I mean, what I'm focused is a little bit of an echo, y'all, so just bear with me here. You know, the strategy in this moment, it is litigation. The harm is acute, and so that can be a frustrating endeavor because when you're trying to match lawlessness with the rule of law. But that being said, we have been successful in slow rolling or blunting a lot of these unlawful, rogue, and racist attacks through the courts. It just takes more time. I still see outside of litigation, legislation as a tool at our disposal, despite how sobering the landscape is from a legislating standpoint. But I just keep applying the pressure. I'm just appealing to, you know, 4 Republicans of conscience. Their majority is very slim. And I'm starting to see that pressure. You know, I've been invited to a number of Republican districts to convene town halls because their own representatives will not meet with them. And as people start to feel the effects of this economy, the impact of these chaotic tariffs, the impact of these mass layoffs, and are worried about their Medicaid and their Social Security. So it's very important that we continue to keep the public aware and informed. And the more informed they are, the more enraged they are, and the more they're clear about who are the architects of this harm. And it is the opposition. And then finally, agitation and mobilization. So I think it's all of those things. It's litigation, it's legislation, it's agitation, it's mobilization. Look, this is a dictatorship, and you can't beat a dictator with appeasement. Hello, somebody. You cannot beat a dictator by being complicit in silence. The only way to beat a dictator is with defiance. And so we have to resist, reject, obstruct at every single turn. And so that's what I continue to do, and that's what I continue to push others to do. This is a 5-alarm fire. Yes, I'm concerned about everybody, but what this means for Black America and this moment of anti-Blackness on steroids, this is not about can we weather the next 4 years, y'all. This is going to shape the next 100 years. This is about harm that we'll be digging out for generations. So I also want to say the other thing I remain squarely focused on is reconstruction. You know, what if we do our job and we rebuild this party and we get our gavel back, to do what? You know, so that's what I'm actively working on now is what does the work of reconstruction look like? Because when you have someone running the country who's running it like one of his many failed bankrupt businesses, they're going to move fast and break things. And it's easy to do that. It's a lot harder to rebuild. But we have to right now begin thinking about what that looks like. What does that mean? And how do we do that?
Randy, your question.
So much for being here. When we talk about rebuilding, I'm thinking about the individual families, those 313,000 Black women who have lost their jobs, many of them very, powerful, well-paying jobs. Do you have any practical advice of what they can do now? How do they start to rebuild their lives?
Well, first, let me just say right now, I'm focused on how do I mitigate the harm while actively looking for ways with which to ensure that we can recover what we've lost. It's just so layered. It's in every single way. It's no wonder that we're feeling overwhelmed, because that is their strategy. They also want us to feel that these things are inevitabilities, but I refuse to accept that. But it is a layered, compounded assault when you also consider the fact that all the gains as someone who led that fight for student debt cancellation and for creative ways for income-driven repayment, and all those things have been rolled back. So you're talking about Black women, 51%, who are the primary breadwinners, the formidable role they play in their families as caregivers and the primary breadwinners. Black women, the most educated, carrying the most debt, now having to then repay those payments, which we've made great progress on, against the backdrop of chaotic tariffs, an unpredictable economy, and being laid off. So I'm trying to get at this in every single way. What I need Black women to know is that I see you. I'm centering you in every single thing that I am doing, and that I'm fighting like hell for you. You know, for your lives, for your families. This is just, it is devastating. It is destabilizing, and we will be digging out, for generations. That is the reality. But I'm trying to do whatever I can in this moment to buffer and mitigate the harms and to hold people accountable, like the Federal Reserve. They have a statutory mandate. This is why lifting up the work of Sadie Alexander, the first Black woman with a PhD in economics, and Coretta Scott King and Barrett Rustin and others, why I've been pushing for a federal job guarantee since I've been in Congress, because that is a part of their statutory mandate. So now I'm saying, you see this crisis happening with Black women, analyze it in a meaningful way, come up with a plan that we can hold you accountable to, and let's get to work. Because if you don't give a damn about Black women, then you don't give a damn about this economy or any working family, because Black women have always been the canaries in the coal mine. So this is a very frightening metric for what this means, for what's to come.
Joe.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for everything that you do. And this is, of course, incredibly important, beyond important. Time to sound the alarms, et cetera. And I appreciate that the window that you're going through, among the many things that you're doing, as you've said, is making a direct appeal to the Fed chair. What's the best way that folks like us that are now aware that there is something that's being attempted to be, there's pressure being brought to bear on this particular issue and this aspect of the issue, which is both micro and macro? You're talking about supporting this Black woman that's on the Fed, as well as analyzing, based on their statutory mandate, what's happening as it pertains to jobs and how this disproportionately affects Black women, et cetera. What's the best way for us to be part of educating people, and particularly our people, on this issue?
Yeah, I would just ask every person to ask their elected representatives to join our call, to support us in that pressure. I think the most important thing is vigilance and stamina and saturation. We need as many people as possible applying that pressure and holding the Fed accountable in this way to do their job. And also, with the other part of that mandate, to affirm the independence of the Fed. Because not only is the targeting of Lisa Cook racist, but a consistent and predictable play from Donald Trump and his obsession with Black leadership and Black women in particular, but it is unlawful. It is racist and it is unlawful. And so join our calls. Ask your other elected leaders and beyond to join our calls and our demands for Chairman Powell to be full-throated in his defense of Lisa Cook and call this what it is. It is an unlawful firing. And in doing that, he also affirms the independence of the Fed.
Congresswoman, one of the things that, again, really since the inauguration, I have been very consistent in saying to this audience that there's a massive effort to defund Black America. And there's a wholesale attack on Black America. That Donald Trump and this administration, Republicans in the House and Senate, absolutely don't like Black people, don't support Black people, want to strip away voting rights of Black people, representation of Black people, jobs of black people, economic gains of black people. We already see the Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action in the schools. But I'm going to tell you right now, that ruling the other day regarding allowing ICE to use racial characteristics to stop and detain Latinos, black people. Look, Latinos are going to have to operate like black folks in South Africa did, carrying around basically these passports showing who they are. Listen, if they allow that, they can allow that to happen to black people. We can't act like we somehow are exempt from this nasty, crazy, deranged right-wing administration and equally complicit Supreme Court.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, this is the time for solidarity, and we have to be intentional, in that way. I mean, again, even if Black America and brown folks will feel the harm the most, the point is this harm is coming for everyone. And so solidarity is key. There was a practical question asked earlier about, how best to support Black women. While we're doing litigation, legislation, agitation, and mobilization, I want to really encourage people, organize, to get old school. We need to organize our blocks. We need to organize our neighborhoods. We need to stand up mutual aid infrastructure. I understand it can never meet the gap. It is not the infrastructure that is big enough to supplant the work of a federal government or a full-paying job. But we have to take care of one another, and we're going to need mutual aid to do that. And so I do want to encourage folks to get to know your neighbors, to lean into community, because that's the only antidote to this chaos and this uncertainty. And I also add, since I do serve on the bipartisan task force on AI, I'm also closely following the impact of AI and the future of working on Black women in particular, because 21 Black women represent maybe 21% of those workforces that stand to be the most impacted by AI.
All right, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.